This is Twit.
The legendary, the Cooler Master Hyper 212, which I guess is the 212 if you want to read it the long way. The whole idea of updating this seems so strange because it's such a classic. It's one of like 2 or 3 coolers that kind of said, you know, you don't have to spend a lot of money to keep your processor cool unless you're an insane overclocker. What's going on with this one?
Well, like you said, I mean, the 212 Evo, if you've shopped for a cooler in the last, I don't know, 5 years, it's been probably #1 on Amazon for as long as I can remember. It's just the go-to aftermarket cooler for just about everyone, and it works with almost every platform. They've updated it over time to encompass newer CPU sockets. The version of it that I bought, it works with like the 2011 socket and all the Intel and AMD sockets. So and as good as it is, and as cheap as it is for its high performance level, we're talking the $30 to $35 range.
Right.
It was not a perfect product. It got the job done, and people lived with things like its sort of idiosyncratic mounting system, which involves if anybody knows this cooler, they know the X-shaped sort of spring-loaded thing that you have to sort of compress and snake through the heat pipes and then open it again, and it has to be on the right side because there's a little knob, and you have to like line it up, and you have to pull it back out if you didn't get it right. Anyway, once you got it mounted, well, it's the way it worked, and once you got it mounted, the performance was fantastic, and you couldn't really argue. But the update,
every cooler should have a reverse Hassenpfeffer load.
The update, it basically takes it to the next level in every way. It's a cosmetic improvement. If it's a performance improvement, as we'll discover, and the mounting mechanism has been completely changed and is now on a par with something that you would expect to see from like Noctua, where now the bottom has these dedicated brackets that you select whether you want the AMD or the Intel style. You attach them to the base with screws. So now you have this solid all metal foundation, which very securely mounts on 4 points. You're not using a separate piece like the brace that they used with the original design that only had actually 1 point of contact in the very center of the block. Now this is more down like every other higher end cooler is, and it's got this really sharp, like stealthy kind of appearance with a black nickel coating, no more exposed copper heat pipes. The whole thing looks a lot more expensive than this is, and you can get it with or without an RGB fan. I was sent the one that had an RGB fan. And you can attach this to your RGB header on your motherboard. And if you don't have one of those, it came with a little control. That's how actually I tested it. That lets you just connect it to a Molex power connector from your power supply, and then use a little remote to switch through the different colors and that sort of thing. But completely optional, of course. And once this thing was mounted, and I brought out the old 212 again and did fresh testing just so I could have a true A to B comparison on the test platform. And this was about a degree cooler with exactly the same thermal compound, same CPU. And I attribute that to just a little bit more secure of contact against the CPU from the new mounting system. But okay, the sound, the actual noise output is so much lower from this. Under load, we're talking about the same noise output as one of those Intel stock coolers, which are pretty quiet, 38.5 decibels. And the Hyper 212 Evo, as great as it is, has always been a little bit louder under load, around 45 decibels. And this is about the same 2,000 RPM limit on the fan. It's plus or minus 10% from the PWM fan, but going at about 1,920 or so RPM under load, 38.5 decibels. You're not going to hear this in a case, and you're not going to hear it over pretty much any GPU. So it's, and the most amazing thing to me was like, oh, it has this nice plate on the top, and it's got the black nickel finish, and they're offering it with an RGB fan. It's going to be really expensive now. And no, like when I looked before publishing the review, it was $35 on Amazon. So we're talking about the same price range, that $30 to $35 price range, and just a refinement in every way and much quieter. So whether you get the one with the plain black fan or the RGB fan, it's just a win. Like I said, they knocked it out of the park with this one. It's everything that a product upgrade should be. Like, it's actually exciting. We're talking about a $35 cooler, but it is exciting. And I think this sets the standard for that budget cooler for a long time, just like the 212 Evo did, where that was the cooler. Like, if you bought a processor that didn't come with one, like Intel, since the 6th gen, hasn't been shipping coolers with any of their unlocked processors. And,
right.
Intel, AMD actually has some decent stock cooling, but this kind of takes it to the next level. There's not really anything that this can't cool. I mean, you wouldn't put this on a Threadripper system, but it doesn't offer that compatibility. But, for desktop users, this is great.
I mean, I got to say, just looking at the fact that they finally, my one challenge with the Cooler Master, the 212 Evo, the original one, was bending fins during installation, and to see the way they've covered the top of that, which one, of course, is much more aesthetic, and two, is going to make it that much harder to schwack the fins. It's the fan design looks interesting. I'm excited. People are probably kind of staring, being like, "Why are you excited about a cooler?" but when this came out, right? It used to be like, okay, there were $60, $70, $80 coolers that were competitive with low-end water coolers, and all of a sudden we had this like no brain. It's $35. You're going to have to spend close to $150, $200 plus, like $150 plus on a liquid cooling system to do something that will give you more cooling. Except unless you were doing pretty serious overclocking, you didn't need it. So it's kind of cool to see them update this. And the originals are down on sale for like $30. So
yeah, still a great cooler, but I would absolutely spend the extra $5 and get this one, if only for the mounting system. Plus, I didn't mention this, the durability, I think, long-term is going to be better. My 212 Evo I bought and only have benchmarked it a few times. It was never in constant use, but just from clipping and unclipping the fan, the fan clips didn't really hold up. One of them cracked pretty easily. This one has much thicker plastic clips for the fans. The black fan version actually uses a metal clip system, so that should be a little bit better. But I think they looked at it and just kind of said, let's improve the mounting system, let's improve the fan, let's improve the aesthetics, and they did all of that, and they didn't charge a lot for it. And Cooler Master obviously knows what they're doing. I mean,
right.
I spotted this while you were talking. It's like, if you look back to the Socket 7 era, they've been doing cooling fans since at least the early 90s, and hey, this is a ball bearing. Okay, this is a quiet one.
So you just hear the whooshing air. And look at that RGB, kids. That's the real reason they updated it, so they wouldn't lose sales to RGB coolers.
Plus, the sort of stealthy black looking cooler, that's kind of like the Be Quiet vibe from their line, the Dark Rock series, and I'm seeing more coolers now kind of like, hey, let's go with a darker color scheme. Like Noctua came out with a darker color scheme after, being stalwarts for the bare aluminum fin plus, brown and tan fans for a long time. So
the remote control cracks me up to no end.
Yeah.